Maurice slammed on his brakes, but it was too late. He felt the sickening thud of impact. We like to believe the floor beneath our feet is solid and the time on our clocks is absolute, but the archives suggest otherwise. Sometimes the veil doesn't just thin, it tears, revealing a world of echoes, shimmering predators, and passengers who shouldn't exist. Tonight we examine 5 documented cases of high strangeness and reality distortions, right here in
The Witness Ledger.
Entry number 020, location, Bold Street, Liverpool, UK. Date, July 1996. Subject, chronological displacement. Time is a tapestry. Sometimes the threads just tangle. Our lead witness in this entry is a man named Frank, an off-duty policeman. Frank wasn't a man prone to flights of fancy. His career was built on the cold, hard gathering of facts. On this particular afternoon, Frank was simply looking for a CD at the Dillon's bookstore. But as he turned the corner of Bold Street, his training failed to explain the sudden vacuum-like silence that swallowed the city. The tarmac beneath his boots hadn't just changed, it had vanished. In its place were rugged Victorian cobblestones. The roar of 1996 traffic was gone, replaced by the rattle of a 1950s Kaplan's delivery van. Frank stood frozen as men in trilbies and trench coats moved past him like ghosts in a waking dream. Panic only truly set in when he spotted a young woman, Emma, standing in the middle of the pavement. Her modern clothes were a stark contrast against the sepia-toned surroundings. Their eyes met, a shared, terrified realization between two people who were suddenly, inexplicably, out of time. Frank followed the girl toward the entrance of what should have been a modern bookstore, but the sign above the door didn't say Dillon's. It read Cripps. As they crossed the threshold, reality snapped. The cobblestones smoothed back into asphalt. The silence was shattered by the hiss of a modern bus engine. Subsequent investigation proved that Cripps and Kaplan's were real businesses that had occupied those exact coordinates decades earlier. For a veteran police officer, the evidence was clear. Frank and Emma hadn't just seen the past, they had stood within it. Entry number 021, location France, date August 4th, 1951. Subject, auditory manifestation. The past isn't dead, it's just waiting to replay. High strangeness isn't always something we see. Sometimes the tear in our reality is purely auditory, a broadcast from the past that refuses to stay silent. In the early morning hours of August 4th, 1951, two sisters-in-law, Dorothy and Agnes, were staying at a quiet guest house overlooking the coast of Dieppe, France. At 4 a.m., the silence of the seaside was shattered. It began with the distant rhythmic thud of heavy artillery, followed by the unmistakable high-pitched scream of dive bombers tearing through the darkness. For 3 agonizing hours, the women sat in their room, listening to a full-scale military invasion. They heard the frantic shouting of men, the rattle of machine gun fire, and the terrifying whistle of falling shells. But when they looked out the window at the moonlit beach, there was nothing. No ships, no planes, no soldiers, just the calm, rhythmic lapping of the tide against the shore. Dorothy and Agnes were so shaken, they documented every sound and every silence, noting the exact timings of the battle. When their logs were later compared to the official military records of the 1942 Dieppe raid, a tragic Allied assault that had occurred 9 years prior, the results were chilling. Every lull in the gunfire, every wave of bombers, and every shift in the intensity of the fight matched the historical battle logs, down to the very minute. They hadn't just heard a haunting, they had tuned into a frequency of history that was still playing on a loop. Entry number 022. Location Seville, Spain. Date July 2008. Subject identity erasure. If the world insists you don't exist, who are you to argue? In July 2008, a 41-year-old woman named Lerina García Gordo woke up to a morning that felt fractured. It began with the small things. The color of her bedsheets was wrong, and a piece of furniture in her hallway was missing. Attempting to shake off the unease, she dressed and drove to her office as she had done for years. But when she arrived, the nightmare truly began. Standing before her own office door, she stared in shock. The name on the plate was not hers. For a moment, Lerina feared she was suffering a medical emergency, a lapse in memory or a stroke. She retraced her steps, checked the floor number, and confirmed she was in the right place. Descending to the lobby, she scanned the official employee directory. Her name was there, but the reality it described was impossible. She was listed as working in a completely different department, reporting to a manager she had never met. In this version of the world, her career had taken a path she had no memory of walking. But the most devastating tear wasn't at her office. It was at home. Before falling asleep the night before, Lerina had been in a committed relationship. Yet, in this new, fractured reality, her boyfriend didn't just leave her. He had ceased to exist. When she traveled to the apartment where he lived, she didn't find him. Instead, a stranger answered the door. A man she had never seen before, living a life that should have belonged to the man she loved. There were no photos of her boyfriend in her phone, no messages, no history. It was as if the universe had performed a hard reset on her personal life, leaving her with the memories of a man who, according to every record in this world, had never been there. Even the city itself had somehow changed. Lerina described a heaviness in the air, a lack of ambient sound that made the entire world feel like a staged set. The colors were muted, the people moved with a mechanical stiffness, and the very sun seemed to lack its usual warmth. She had woken up in a life that was 99% hers, but that final 1% was a tear she couldn't stitch back together. To this day, she claims she is still trapped in this slightly wrong version of her own life, waiting for the world to reset. Entry number 023. Location, global woodlands. Date, ongoing. Subject, bipedal cloaking. Nature has a way of hiding the things it doesn't want us to find. In the world of tracking, there is a phenomenon known as low-profile movement, the ability of a predator to melt into its surroundings. But some witnesses describe something that defies biology. They call it the glimmering man. Imagine standing in a quiet stretch of countryside. The birds fall silent. You feel a gaze on the back of your neck. When you look toward the tree line, you don't see a figure, you see a distortion. A vertical shimmer in the air, roughly 6 to 7 feet tall, that bends the light around it like a lens. As it moves, the trees behind it warp and ripple, as if you are looking through a sheet of moving glass or water. It doesn't leave footprints. It doesn't snap twigs. It simply glimmers through the canopy, watching with a cold, predatory patience. It is the ultimate tear in the visual spectrum. As someone who has tracked the quiet predators of our valleys, I know that nature is a master of disguise. But the glimmering man isn't using fur or foliage. It is using the light itself. Witnesses report that when the entity stands perfectly still, it becomes 100% invisible. It is only when it moves that the glitch in the light betrays its presence. While many dismiss these sightings as optical illusions, The ledger points to a chillingly consistent piece of evidence, the 1980 account of a seasoned bow hunter in the American forest. High in his tree stand, waiting in the absolute silence of the dawn, the hunter noticed something that made his blood run cold. Just 30 feet away, a distortion was moving through the brush. He described it not as a creature of flesh and bone, but as a human-shaped blur, like a pane of corrugated glass moving through the trees. As it passed in front of a trunk, the bark would warp. As it stepped through the ferns, the green fronds would twist and ripple within its outline. The hunter, a man used to the camouflaged patterns of the natural world, realized he wasn't looking at a living animal. He was looking at something that had mastered the physics of light. It moved with a heavy bipedal gait, yet it made no sound. No leaves crunched, no branches snapped. It was a silent, shimmering predator moving through a world that couldn't see it. If a leopard's spots are nature's way of breaking up an outline, the glimmering man is the ultimate evolution. So we have to ask, is this a biological adaptation of the creature we know as Bigfoot? A physical beast with a near supernatural cloaking ability? Or is the glimmering man an entity in its own right? Perhaps a traveler from elsewhere using a technology that our science hasn't yet caught up with? Or an undiscovered terrestrial being that has eluded discovery due to its unique cloaking ability? When you hear that blood-curdling scream in the woods or feel the canopy shift above you, remember, just because your eyes can't find a shape doesn't mean the space is empty. Entry number 024. Location: Bluebell Hill, Kent, UK. Date: 1974. Subject: vanishing passenger. Don't forget to check your back seats. Our final entry for today's investigation is perhaps the most intimate form of the tear: the vanishing passenger. It is a story told by exhausted long-haul drivers and lone commuters alike. You see a figure on the roadside, bedraggled and alone. You pull over. They climb in, buckle their seatbelt, and engage in conversation, sometimes for miles. But then the atmosphere in the car shifts. A sudden drop in temperature, a prickle on the skin. You turn to ask a question, and the passenger seat is empty. There was no sound of a door opening, no screech of tires. The car is moving at 60 miles per hour, doors locked, yet your companion has simply deleted. In many of these logged cases, the evidence isn't just a memory. Drivers have reached over to find the seatbelt still clicked into place, holding back nothing but air. In some instances, a physical object is left behind. A damp patch on the upholstery, a vintage coin, or a single glove, belonging to someone who, according to local records, hasn't walked those roads in decades. It is as if the road itself has a memory, and for a few miles you were invited to share it. While these stories are often dismissed as urban legends, the ledger points to a chillingly detailed police report from July 13, 1974. A bricklayer named Maurice Goodenough was driving along Bluebell Hill in Kent when a young woman suddenly appeared in his headlights. The difference with this case is that Maurice didn't stop his car in time for the passenger to enter the vehicle. Maurice slammed on his brakes, but it was too late. He felt the sickening thud of impact. Panic-stricken, he jumped out of the car and found a girl, roughly 10 years old, lying in the road with severe injuries. He wrapped her in a blanket, carried her to the side of the road, and then raced to the nearest police station to get help. When he returned to the scene with 2 police officers, the road was empty. The girl was gone, but the blanket Maurice had wrapped her in was still there, neatly folded on the verge, with not a single drop of blood on it. No hospital in the region admitted a child with those injuries that night, and no body was ever found. Local records later revealed that a decade earlier, on that exact stretch of road, a young girl had been killed in a car accident on her way to a wedding. Maurice hadn't just hit a pedestrian, he had collided with a moment in time. 5 cases, 5 moments where the internal logic of our world simply stuttered. Whether it's a nameplate on an office door that doesn't belong to you or a shimmering predator that our science cannot name, these tears remind us that the reality we trust is thinner than we think. We walk through a world of echoes, and sometimes those echoes find a way to speak back. The ledger is open. I am a witness. And if you have encountered a glitch that defied your own logic, I am waiting for your entry. Don't look away. I'll see you in the next archive of
The Witness Ledger.